Everybody, welcome to Weekly Dose Wednesday at a very special time. I am so excited to be here with you guys. So, for those of you that don't know, my name is Erin Harrigan. I am the Hustle with Heart and Health Coach. And this is our Weekly Dose Live that now takes place here on the Hustle with Heart Coach page. It also gets streamed over to Instagram on IGTV, and it also becomes our podcast, the Hustle with Heart podcast, and those episodes drop every Monday. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, I think it's probably August 17th, maybe. I'm usually a couple of weeks ahead, and I am so excited. So I changed the time today for two reasons. Number one is that I completely miss doing my daily dose. For those of you that don't follow me on social media, why not? I'm just kidding. I do a daily dose video every morning where I take a scripture and I really talk about what it means to me as an entrepreneur and how we can implement that in our business. And totally missed doing that this morning. And then tonight we have some plans. So I'm not going to come to you live at 9 instead of doing it today at 4. But I was really inspired recently by a few people I was talking to, and we were talking about, the idea of renewing the mind. And I've been reading this book, which is Dr. Carolyn Leaf's book, Switch On Your Brain. And what I love about this book is that she really takes these concepts of science like quantum physics and neuroplasticity and epigenetics, and she demonstrates how they are truly scripture based, that they are truly inventions of the Lord, and how our mind, our thinking physically changes our body, it changes our actions, and it changes people around us. And I don't mean like that we can change people, but it impacts people. It even impacts people we don't know. So what I thought I would do is talk to you now that we're past the middle of the year of 2020, and it's been a crazy year, right? I think we all can agree on that. I really want to talk to you about what's been on my reading list this year. So first and foremost, if you have read my book, Pursuing Success God's Way, A Practical Guide to Hustle with Heart, or you've followed me at all, you know that I talk about how I was always the person that when someone would talk about a book on stage or we were at a training, like I would buy all the books. And so I had all the books. And sometimes I would read them and sometimes I wouldn't. But definitely 99% of the time I would read them and then I wouldn't apply them. So coming into this year, I got really, really focused on what books do I definitely want on my shelf and what books do I want to read this year in this beginning of a new decade. And this year, I really wanted to focus on mindset and overcoming fear and putting Jesus first. Now, you know that as the Hustle with Heart and Health Coach, my whole brand ministry message is that we are pursuing success God's way and that Christ is at the center of all we do. And that means that we look at results differently, we look at our businesses differently, we look at action differently. So I really wanted to focus my reading this year around those kinds of topics. So I'm going to talk very briefly about the books that I've read so far this year and what that looks like. So I started my year, first of all, I was finishing up my own book, which published March 31st. So I'll just selfishly talk about that. So Pursuing Success God's Way, A Practical Guide to Hustle with Heart. You can find this on Amazon. Obviously, you can go to erinharrigan.com. But the point of this book was to give a truly practical guide, including my own story, of the transformation of moving from self-centered and self-reliant to God-centered and God-reliant. And what I call in the book, my BC life, which was before Christ, and my AD life, which was after death to self. Now, that's an ongoing process. That's not a checklist, but that's really what this book is about. And then it gives you some key principles and then how to physically put that into action. So I spent the better part of the first quarter really working on finishing this up, and this published March 31st. So I humbly come before you and say, add this to your entrepreneur reading list. But as I was finishing that up, an author whom I love and admire so much, Lisa Whittle, was also about to publish her new book, which is called Jesus Over Everything. Now, I met Lisa in person and I got to see her speak last year at the Proverbs 31 She Speaks conference, which is where I sat and realized I am called to be a messenger of this idea of bridging faith and business and pursuing success God's way. I am called to bring forth the message of hustle with heart. And I want to do that in a number of ways. And I do that through my podcast and through my writing and my blogging, and definitely even in my health and wellness business with Arbonne, because that's how I train my team. So I got to meet Lisa and I got to read her book, I Want God. And it was all about wanting God more than everything else in our life. So this is a powerful, powerful book, Jesus Over Everything. And what I loved about this book is that we want simpler lives. We don't want to continue to complicate things, but the only way to do that is to put Jesus first. And she talks about choosing commitment over mood, steady over hype, service over spotlight, real over pretty, holiness over freedom. So this was the first book that I read in 2020, and I believe it just completely set the stage for everything else. While I was finishing that book up, I discovered a couple of books that I read on my Kindle. So that's what that's what I'm looking at right now. And those two books were Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper and Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby. And these were such a beautiful reminder, again, bridging off of Lisa Whittle's book, that we get to experience God and we get to choose how we experience him in the joy and the peace and the hope in life, as well as not wasting our life on worldly endeavors, but what is God's true purpose for us? And you know that I've shared his real purpose is two things. One is to love people like Christ loved people, and two, to make disciples. And the way that we get to do that is how we show up every day in life, in business. So John Piper, Don't Waste Your Life, and Henry Blackaby's Experiencing God were two that I was reading right after Lisa's book. Now I want to stop there before I go forward because I want to infuse some scripture for you like I always do in these episodes. So first and foremost, my friend Jessica, I'm going to give a shout out to Jessica Davis. You know, her favorite verse, her foundational verse is Psalm 1, 2, and 3. But I'm going to read this to you because this is really the foundation of how we build a God-centered business by being tuned in to our relationship with God every single day. And this is what it says. This is the New Living Translation. Oh, the joys of those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or stand around with sinners, or join in with mockers. So all those who don't follow the world. They delight in the law of the Lord, meditating on it day and night. They're in the word with the Lord, and that is what they're keeping in mind throughout their days. They are like trees planted along a riverbank, bearing fruit in each season. Their leaves never wither, and they prosper in all they do. So in other words, being close to the Lord, putting him at the center, and being connected to his word all day, every day, is how we get to be stronger and planted and not withering and producing our fruit and prospering in all we do. But then in Joshua 1, 7 and 8, one of my favorite sections of the Bible, the Lord is saying to Joshua, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the left or to the right. So don't look around you. Don't look at what people are doing beside you. Run your race and stay focused. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually, his word. Meditate on it day and night, so you will be sure to obey everything in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. And he goes on to say that the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So you get the sense that being in the word and marinating it and renewing our mind constantly, which we're going to get to that scripture in just a second, is incredibly important. So what you're putting into your mind is what is transforming your very DNA and how you're thinking. Okay? There are a lot of personal development books out there, right? And I'm not here to slam that. I'm just going to say this. The Bible is the foundation, and God made us to be able to renew our minds. He tells us throughout Scripture to not be afraid, to be courageous, and to meditate on His Word. And guess what? That's what the rest of the world is reading, but in a different context. So all of these things are biblically based and incredibly important for us as God-centered entrepreneurs. The last one that I want to take you to really quickly is Proverbs 16:3, and it says, "Commit your works to the Lord, and your thoughts will be established," or your plans will succeed, or your steps will be established. It's about committing our thoughts and everything that we do to Him that allows Him to guide us in pursuing success His way. So let's turn to the Mac Daddy scripture, which we all know and love, and it really underpins how God has made us. And by the way, throughout the Bible, it tells us that we have the mind of Christ and we are to be aligned to the vine. And so here's what it says in Romans 12:2. I'm going to go to the English Standard Version. "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect." So in other words, renew your mind. You were made to renew your mind. You were made to think new thoughts. You were made to create new synapses in the mind. And that's what Dr. Carolyn Leaf talks about. So why do we need to do this? Because as it says in John 8:44, Satan is the father of lies, and he will get us spiraling down in thought, in what could happen, in worry, and in anxiety. And I don't know if you saw my post yesterday on Instagram about she who, the woman who walks with the Lord. It's going to take me a minute to find it. It was posted by the incredible She Works His Way community, and it's going to take me a minute to find it, but I posted it yesterday, and the point was, if you're walking with Christ, there's no need for anxiety, but that's why we have to renew our minds every single day. We have to renew our minds because Satan is the father of lies and he wants to get us spiraling. And speaking of spiraling, the very next book that I read was this one, Jenny Allen's Get Out of Your Head. Now, when I became a Christian in 2014 and I started to really walk in this idea of hustle with heart and pursuing success God's way, a new friend of mine, very, very strong Christian woman, recommended to me Jenny Allen's book, Anything. And it's about praying, God, use me for anything. Now that's a scary prayer, right? Because immediately my mind was like, oh my gosh, what if he sends me to the other side of the world to be a missionary? Guys, so what if he did? But the point is, he's going to use us and the gifts that he's given us. But we have to be open to anything. Trust me when I tell you, this hustle with heart, everything was not my plan. It just wasn't. But it has enriched my life and it has allowed me to bring value in his message to others. And so this book, Get Out of Your Head by Jenny Allen, is fantastic. And we were just talking about spiraling thoughts. And what I love is that in each chapter, she kind of shows us spiraling thoughts and how we can change them. So again, renewing our mind, right? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about resources for renewing the mind and putting those things into action. So one of the ways that the enemy gets us spiraling, as you've seen in my book, where I talk about distraction, discontent, and discouragement, discontent, and doubt, is fear. Fear. Now, I know there are a million acronyms for fear. Face everything and run, or false evidence appearing real. But here's what I love by an author that I have totally fallen in love with, Jennifer Allwood. Fear is not the boss of you. Fear is not the boss of you, but fear will get you stuck, and you cannot afford to be stuck, friends, because What you do, the world needs. As my friend Dr. Sherry says, God made you on purpose with a purpose, and the world needs you. And fear is not the boss of you. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, one of the things I love most about Jennifer Allwood is that she is not afraid to stand up and speak out for Christ. And she has an entire section in the back of her book that she references. Like, if you're ready for an altar call while you're reading this book, if you haven't come to Christ yet, turn back to this appendix or whatever she calls it and learn why that's so important. So I love that she's not afraid of that. But again, renewing the mind. The world wants us to be fearful. Think of everything that's going on in the world right now. It wants us to be fearful. It wants us to be fearful of each other. It wants us to live this way. But we get to choose as followers of Christ and as God-centered entrepreneurs to do something different. Okay. Excuse me. I have an allergy thing going on. The next book that I read, so I love T.D. Jakes. And seeing him in person was on my bucket list. And at the beginning of 2019, like literally January 4th or 3rd, I think it was, my friend Jessica, who also loves Psalm 1, invited me to come to her church in Glenarden and see T.D. Jakes speak. So you guys, I mean, like seriously, what the heck? Actually, I think that was the beginning of 2019. So this is his new book, Crushing. Now, what I loved about this is how he related it to wine, not just because I love wine, but because it's such symbolism of wine and the vines. And I'm going to get to another book that talks about that too. But it's about how God turns pressure into power. And this was an incredible book that I think my friend Wynn Briscoe was reading. And I was like, ooh, yeah, that needs to be next on my list. So I read this in the spring, honestly, just as COVID was hitting. And it was the perfect book to be reading at that time because we've all heard that businesses need to pivot. And I was sort of like, how am I going to do this whole like hustle with heart, Arbonne wellness? What does this look like? And the thing is I'd been doing business online for a really, really long time. So that pivot wasn't bad, but this really brought me back to some of the crushing that I went through in 2014 to 2018 and how God had delivered me from so much to be able to allow my mess to be this message and my test to be this testimony. So then the next book that I read was Chasing Vines by Beth Moore. And this was an incredible book to read after Crushing because it was like perfectly timed right in there for me to be able to take that whole wine and vine and olive branch and just the branches and all of it and to read Beth Moore's book about finding your way to an immensely fruitful life. So that was just a beautiful thing. Now, before I get to the last book, which is the book that I'm reading right now, in between all of that, last July I had reached out to my mentor, the Velvet Hammer, as you know I call my mentor in my book, and I was really sort of struggling with taking some different action. And she said, I think you need to read this Bible study called Breathe by Priscilla Shirer. Now, I'm a huge Priscilla Shirer fan. I'm pronouncing her name wrong, Shire. So I actually started this in the fall, but then my friend Grace came alongside me and we did it in the spring. And this is all about making room for Sabbath in your life and how even the good things that the Lord gives us can take up too much room, too much energy, too much space, and we need to allow for Sabbath. So this is an incredible Bible study, you guys. I highly, highly recommend it. And what I find is that when I allow for the Sabbath, I'm calmer, I have more joy, more peace, more hope, and my business grows because I'm allowing God to be God and not me to be in control of all of it. So then the last book, which is what I'm reading right now with my friend Jessica, is Switch on Your Brain. Now, I love this book. I'm on chapter 7. Chapter 9 introduces her 21-day brain detox, and we're going to be starting this on August 10th. So I can't wait to see what that 21 days look like, but I can tell you already reading this that my thought processes are different. And I'm amazed at how scripture foretells how the Lord designed us to renew our minds and how the Lord created us to be in charge of our thoughts and our minds. You know, as a man thinketh, so is he. This really breaks all of that down. So I'm going to finish up. This was a longer episode than I intended. But my point today was to bring you a peek behind the curtain at what does it look like when you're really focused on renewing your mind and doing the personal development that and the spiritual development that you need to be doing for your entrepreneur life. There is a saying, work harder on yourself than you do on your business. And if you are not making time to work on yourself, if you are not making time to get in the word and to pray and to be in your journaling and your meditation, and if you're jumping out of bed and turning on this phone and hitting the ground running, you are missing plugging into the most powerful power source that there is. And I want to really encourage you to think about what you're doing in that space. But I also want to encourage you to think the next time somebody recommends a book, just like I've done here, don't go out and get that book unless you're truly going to put what you learn into action, because it means nothing to read the books and not take action to apply your learning. So thank you for tuning in at this special time. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the podcast. I would love to hear what you think. So leave some comments here in the Hustle with Heart Coach page. Leave some comments on your favorite podcast channel. And as always, it is an honor and privilege to bring you this message as the Hustle with Heart and Health Coach. All right, guys, see ya.